Alright, we've got an understanding of the rule of thirds and how to use the guidelines to frame different objects in a shot. But the most common object, or better said subject, is the human being. Whether you're filming a presentation, a dialogue between two people, an action scene, it doesn't matter. Filming people comes with framing rules. There are three main framings: the close-up, the medium shot, and the long shot. In between, we have subframings like extreme close-up or medium long shot, extreme long shot. These are subframings and are therefore not that important to remember. You can also say, let's make a long shot which is a little bit closer. It doesn't really matter as long as you understand the three main framings. So let's start with the long shot. This means that we're going to frame so that the talent is completely visible in the shot from head to toes. And as we learned in the previous lesson, we could go for a center composition if they are looking into the camera. If they are looking away from the camera, give your talent viewing space and align them on the proper side of the vertical guidelines. Using the horizontal guidelines becomes trickier. We are looking at the face, so we might want to align that to the horizontal guideline. But in a long shot, that creates too much headspace above the subject. That space is called breathing space. You need some of that, but not too much. Just enough to get your subject loose from the framing. On the bottom where the feet are at, you also want to give some breathing space. Space between the feet and the bottom frame. If you would stick the feet to the frame, it looks very odd. This is called the puppet effect, by the way. Just don't ask me why, it's just this. The same thing with your talent's head. Sticking it to the upper framing is odd. It creates that puppet effect which you want to avoid. Give it some breathing space. Now let's move a little bit closer into the talent. This is considered a medium long shot. We're going to cut the feet from the talent off. I mean, not for real, just by framing it. Now we learned about the puppet effect. You don't want anyone to stand on your framing. And the same thing occurs with any joint. That means ankles, knees, pelvis, etc. Avoid to cut into anything that can bend. So a medium long shot like this is odd, as we're cutting into the knees. I know, filmmaking is cruel. There's a lot of cutting involved. Anyways, you don't want to do that. Always cut above or underneath a joint. This feels so much more natural. Now let's take a medium shot. We're going to cut above the pelvis. Interesting now is that our subject has become more prominent in the shot. It takes up more of the framing. So we can actually place now the eyes of the subject onto the horizontal guidelines. Keep in mind to give breathing space above the head, definitely for a medium shot. We can go a little bit closer again and take a medium close-up. Essentially, we're cutting underneath the shoulders. We're getting so close that it's impossible now to give breathing space above the head. So we'll cut into the head, avoiding the puppet effect, and make sure to cut in the forehead as well. Alright, we're getting the hang of this, guys. Let's go for a close-up. You want to be above the shoulders now, but underneath the neck, as that is a joint as well. The eyes are going to lay above the upper guideline, otherwise we'll cut away too much of the neck and the chin to leave an unwanted space above the eyes. The forehead becomes not as important anymore. We are focusing on the eyes, nose, and mouth in a close-up. And finally, there's the extreme close-up. Basically, you can choose what you want to focus on now. Either that's going to be their eyes or mouth or whatever. Most often, you're going to frame it in the middle unless you have a good reason to show other areas. Like if you're going for the eyes but also for the nose, you can put then the eyes on the upper guideline or a little bit above and leave room below for the nose. And so that is in a nutshell how to frame a talent. And just like with the viewing space, you can find faces back on other objects too. A teddy bear is also a talent that can be framed by the same principles. Even a dull object like a fridge. And before you're wondering what about the joints, well, that are the intersections between the two doors. That is considered a joint as well. You know, many objects have something like that. Now, take for instance here my light in the back. This right here at the light stand where I can tilt it up and down, that is considered a joint. So you either cut in the framing just above it or right underneath. Now there's one last framing type which we haven't talked about yet, and that is the establishing shot. It isn't even an actual framing, but more of a storytelling shot. An establishing shot is oftentimes used at the very start of a film or a new scene. It displays the location and sometimes also the time. For instance, a wide shot of a house. What follows next is a scene of a family having dinner in that house. But that establishing shot of the house tells the audience that the family is in that house and that it shows during the day. The sun is shining. It helps to locate where we are at, and we can use that principle to cheat a little bit, because that establishing shot doesn't have to be a real location. But you can trick your audience into thinking it's the location that the scene is played at. An example here are these skyscrapers where suddenly an explosion happens. We then cut to a shot of me where I pretend to have tried to defuse the bomb, but that failed. Now, obviously, I'm not actually sitting in that particular building, but from a story point of view, I am. And that's where stock clips comes in very handy too. We use a library called Storyblocks for that. They've been a long-time partner of us, by the way. It's basically a library filled with over 1 million stock videos of various genres and themes. And you can use these commercially and download unlimited video assets with an active subscription. So that's why I can highly recommend it to anyone. Now, for instance, I came across this establishing shot of a planet. That's something that I can't film, obviously, but I can download it from here, and it allows me to point out a specific scene that plays back on a different planet like Mars. We then cut to these shots right here, and it feels like these guys are on Mars, which of course they aren't. This is on some desert right here on planet Earth. These are, by the way, also stock clips from Storyblocks, but you get the idea. You know what? I'll leave a link down here in the class notes if you want to check out Storyblocks. That's a special link, by the way, which supports our business and these courses that we're making here. Anyways, an establishing shot doesn't really have rules in terms of how wide your shot is. I mean, it can be an entire planet. Important is that it shows the location and maybe also the time of day. Do make sure that you treat your object as a subject, so the entire house and the entire planet becomes one subject. And as we've learned about how to frame a subject to the rule of thirds, give it some breathing space and some viewing space if you don't choose a center composition. Now, we're not done with framing just yet. There are 2 more lessons about framing with foreground objects and one about backgrounds. After that, you can take a small break. Until then, keep watching, guys.